Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Good
Hey,
evening.
Rosemary.
Hello, Rosemary.
Hello. Hi, Peter.
Good evening. How are you folks, all of you?
Good. How are you?
Just great. I have a
Good.
few public comment things on parking spaces and winter rules. Again, I'm sort of a broken record on that, but I think there's some opportunities that we ought to discuss, or you ought to discuss, before we go ahead and rebuild the north end. And I think having a high parking bar is inappropriate for the future. So, but I'll wait till public comment and you come into session to talk about that.
Yeah, well, we have a fourth commissioner coming on, so we will be able to call the meeting to order. Caitlin, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, well, it is 5:30, so why don't we get started and hope that some other commissioners come on in a minute. That's particularly important because, just so everybody knows, my daughter is having surgery today, and it ended up being scheduled for afternoon. So I may get a call from the doctor or the hospital once it's done, in which case I will either sign off or at least mute myself and take video off, and I might or might not be able to come back depending on how everything happens. So the vice chair or maybe the vice chair might have to take over. But right now, if I have to leave, there wouldn't be a quorum. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. The first item on the agenda is any adjustments to the agenda. Are there any adjustments to the agenda we need to make? Yes, Rosemary.
David, and the commissioners, I'm just wondering, I see we're going to be talking about some interim zoning changes in new business, and I'm wondering if this would be part of any discussion we may be having at the forum on October 18th. And it seems though, I just want to make sure we're all talking from a common voice that night.
Mhm.
And so if we can just add that as a discussion point, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I think, yeah, the discussion of interim zoning is really very preliminary.
Yeah,
I don't think
understood.
there'll be anything specific, so I think we can probably take that up as part of that discussion as
Okay,
to
great. Thank you.
what happens going forward.
Thanks.
Okay, so we've got Becky has just come on as well. Hi, Becky.
Hello.
So
Hi, Becky.
I will repeat what I said earlier because you're the vice chair, but I might have to leave during the meeting because my daughter is having surgery today, and it ended up being scheduled in the afternoon. So if I should get a call about that, I'll have to check out at least for a while. So as vice chair, you would get to take over.
All right, I am almost ready.
Okay, but we'll just go forward. So yeah, when we talk about interim zoning, we'll also make sure we talk about if that has anything we want to bring up or that should come up during the October 8th meeting forum. Any other adjustments to the agenda? If not, the next item is approval of minutes from the September 14th meeting. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move to approve the minutes. I did want to just note, Janet, that my last name has an S on the end of it.
Okay.
That was misspelled a couple of times, but
Sorry about that. I will fix
that's
that.
okay.
And is there a second to the motion?
I'll second. Sorry.
Okay. I'll say Rosemary seconded, and then we had one correction, which I think is just clerical, so it doesn't really need to be an amendment to the minutes. Are there any adjustments or other changes to the minutes? If not, I'll call question on approving the minutes from September 14th. I was not at the meeting, so I'm going to abstain, but all in favor, say aye. Or raise
Aye.
your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Raylene, did you say aye?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so the minutes are approved with 4 votes and 1 abstention, who was me. Next item on the agenda is public comment for something not on the agenda. And Representative Anthony mentioned before we called to order that he wanted to comment during this time. So the floor is yours.
I do, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much, and welcome to Caitlin. I have been on this topic before. I want to urge you folks as speedily as possible, knowing it takes time for the council to act on a recommendation, to try to find a consensus to reduce the required parking spaces per residential unit. I really think going forward, that's got to happen. And we're in a rebuilding stage, and it would be, I think, unfortunate if we were building and designing with parking requirements that would not stand the test of time. So that's my repeat call to review that, find a consensus how to lower that dedication of real estate. And closely aligned to that, and with new leadership in the DPW, I really would urge you folks to urge the council to consider modifying the winter parking ban as it stands now, which is a blanket ban from date to date, as opposed to a more nuanced approach. And I think not only is it opportune because of new leadership at DPW, but it's also opportune because there may be funding opportunities if there is a technological aspect to your thoughts on that, some kind of warning system if we do not go date to date. Again, I really think this is an opportunity that should not be missed if you can find consensus and forward a recommendation to the council. Since it's an automobile or vehicular ordinance, it would be they who would have to essentially attack that. But I really would urge not letting another meeting go by if you can find consensus to make a recommendation to the council. And with that, I do myself have another obligation at 6 o'clock, but I wanted to get that on the table. I thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, Jake, you have to unmute, but I have to unmute. Jake had his hand up, so I wondered if he had comments to make.
I do. I was just, well, comment on the question. I was just curious where the planning commission is on the raise grant and bylaw modernization grant. I believe the raise grant is money flowing through CCRPC, but it's $100 and some $1,000 for downtown transit oriented development. And it seems like it would intersect quite a bit with the well, I think your agenda item says North End plan, but probably means the North Main plan, right? So I'm just
It
curious
does.
where the planning commission is on that and the bylaw modernization grant that was awarded, I
Janet,
think, back in winter.
yeah. So Janet, you had your hand up. Do you have a comment to add or respond to that?
I can respond to that if you want.
Yes, please.
Or you can as chair.
Okay, well, I can start. So the grant for the North Main Street study is on the agenda tonight because we have a proposal and hoping that we can discuss that proposal tonight and accept the proposal and move on, get the process started. So that's the one item. The other item, as far as the planning grant, is there was an RFP issued. It did not receive any responses. So I think Janet is preparing to reissue it and has gotten some more planning companies that could be added to the list. So maybe Janet could speak to that a little bit.
Sure. That's exactly that. We got no responses from anybody, no phone calls, no, nothing. I'm gonna put it back out there with an extended date. I've got a few more names of consultants that are actually in Eastern New York and Northern Massachusetts, that have done work in Vermont. Other than the same ones that are on the list from ACCD, for consultants, and, put it back out there and, see if we could get another bite at it. Any
And so my main,
suggestions from you are thoroughly welcome, in your day job. The hat that you wear during your day job, Jake, would be great.
well, my main question was really about the raise grant. And since it's overlaps, it's gonna have an overlapping scope with the North Main Street plan. And I was wondering if it's, if there's a contractor for that, where that is in the process.
I don't know what you mean by race grant. You're talking about the bylaw mod grant, and that's the one we didn't get any.
No, the city has $100,000 for transit oriented development, planning, integrated land use planning and transit planning. And as I understand, the money is federal money being administered by CCRPC. Barre was selected as a recipient for those funds to do that work, and it would have an overlapping scope with the North End plan. And so I was wondering, where that is and how that, if there's going to be coordination between these two plans.
I am unaware of that grant. I haven't seen any signed grant, no internal chatter about it. So I can definitely ask
Right.
Brian, Nicholas, and anyone else who might know.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I'd echo Representative Anthony's encouragement to reduce parking requirements, if not eliminate them outright.
Okay, thank you. Janet?
Yeah, I wanted to put in that we have Monday morning, this coming, our internal parking team meeting. We're going to be talking about we haven't met in a few months. So if there's any outcomes of tonight that I can bring forward to Monday morning's meeting, I think we are going to be talking about the parking ban. And if there's anything that we can do, anything that the Public Works Director thinks he can do, but if there's any outcome from tonight that you'd like me to bring to them Monday, I absolutely will.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so I don't see any other members of the public at the meeting, so I think we can move on unless anybody has more comments. The next item is old business, which is talking about the planning grant proposal. And this is for the North Main and Elm Street plan, and attached to the packet is the proposal. And we had a subcommittee that I think looked at it, and I don't know if anybody has a report on that, but I'm hoping we can discuss the proposal, and if it's acceptable to the group, to vote to accept it or have the city accept it and get the process going. So I don't know if there's anybody here. I know Joe sent some comments and was involved in that process as well. Did you have something, Becky?
I was just going to say, I think we reviewed it individually and chatted a little bit over email about it. I think it's fair to say that all three of us were encouraged by the response and thought it was a good one. A lot of our questions were more about like managing what the Planning Commission's role is in this process and how to, I think like what I would describe as change management throughout this, to bring City Council along with us, to bring the community along with us as we go down this path. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm kind of taking that's suggestion that we should go forward, but we do need to spend some time making sure that the Planning Commission is involved and that the process moves smoothly and involves the community. And I think that the proposal, as I read it, that they have a pretty good plan for community involvement, but a lot of the responsibility for actually publicizing and getting the community, getting people to participate in the process is going to fall on the city and the planning commission and that process. That was sort of what I take away from that. Barry's always had a challenge getting people to come to these sorts of meetings. I think the city's figured out that if there's food involved, maybe more people come. So our Barry, our Barry flood recovery discussions have included pizza as part of the pizza dinner as part of the process. So I don't know if anybody wants to make a motion to, Janet, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, to recommend that city accept the proposal. I don't know that we actually are the ones who do it, but we should make a recommendation that city move forward with the contract that's proposed.
Yes, your
Anyone
recommendation
have any
would
thoughts
be
or comments, or
appreciated.
does somebody want to make a motion? Rosemary.
The only question I have, I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me, the proposal, but just for memory in reviewing it, is when in the process the council is involved. Just for memory, it seemed as though it was closer to the end. And I just don't want us to be in a position like we were with the parking issue that, people aren't on board. So thank you, Janet. I don't know how other people feel about that, but that would be my only comment. I think the proposal itself was great, meets our, financial expectations, and this company is the one that worked with us before, correct? Yeah. So anyway, that would be my only comment, that we consider the timeline when the council sees things.
Okay, thanks for the comment, and I think that should be part of the process, but ultimately the plan has to be presented to the city council
Right.
and go from there. But I think we can certainly encourage council members to participate and make sure that the city council and relevant staff in the city know what's going on and get invited to some of the site visit and other things, because they're really stakeholders, as are we.
Great. Thank you.
Are there any other comments that anyone has? I think one thing Joe did mention is because it's October 12th and the contract proposal indicated starting the process on October 16th. The process will probably be pushed back a little bit, and it might be good to ask for a new kind of updated calendar schedule so that we can all have an idea of how the timing will work. So I'd hope that's something Janet could convey when she talks to these folks. Anyone else have thoughts to share on the proposal? Would anybody like to make a motion to recommend acceptance of the proposal and moving forward with this contract?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion, and do we have a second?
I can second.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion and a second to recommend moving forward with the contract and the proposal. Is there any more discussion, or anybody else have anything to add? Okay, if not, can call the question. All in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we've adopted the motion. So thank you, everyone. The next item on the agenda is really furthering the discussion, which is the planning commission has talked about a site visit and taking the plan we have now and going out and looking at the Elm Street and North Main and Summer Street area and looking at the plan that we have now, and some of the things that are in the plan have been done. Some of them probably will never happen at this point. But maybe we would want to incorporate that into working with the contractor so that we could try to plan a site visit in conjunction with part of their work. And I don't know what others think, and if it's probably something that we might try to schedule as a work session. So I don't know if folks are interested in setting up a site visit, and if so, we can try to look at calendars and see when that might be, being mindful that it gets dark earlier. Yes, Caitlin.
Yeah, I would be very much in favor of doing that. I think, you know, as many commissioners as can be there. And maybe that's also an opportunity to invite some of the city councilors as well, so
Yep.
that they're involved, you know, at the beginning stages of the process. I think that's an excellent idea. And yeah, we should try and do it sooner rather than later,
Okay.
before it gets too cold.
Yes. Okay. Raylene has her hand up. Do you have something, Raylene?
Yeah, I too am in favor of the site visits. I think that that's much easier and better to see and then just talk about it. I've lived here a long time and I still don't always know what streets are what when we're talking about them. So I think that would be really beneficial.
Okay. So it sounds like people would like to try to plan a site visit. Certainly, I know Joe wanted to do it, and I think Becky was nodding her head yes as well. So maybe what we could do is talk about dates and times that might work for people. As I said, I'm not sure it should kind of take the place of a meeting. But I don't know if people are available earlier in the day on weekdays, or whether we should talk about maybe a weekend morning, or whether we want to just try to schedule another Thursday meeting at 5:30 or 5 o'clock. Anybody have preferences or thoughts about availability? I'm retired, so unless I'm in Boston helping take care of my daughter, I'm around. Anyone else have scheduling
I work
thoughts?
9 to 5, but I do telework 4 days a week. So other than Wednesdays, I'm usually in Barre and could certainly I have enough flexibility in my schedule that I could make a daytime or maybe like late afternoon kind of visit work, if that helps.
Would other folks be available at, say 4 o'clock in the afternoon sometime?
Yes.
I can be available, yes. For sure, I can.
Okay. Yeah, and Becky, would that
Yep,
work for you?
yep.
So I'm going to suggest Thursday, October 26th at 4 o'clock. Would that be something people could do? Because Caitlin said no Wednesdays.
Yeah.
And I'll actually be in Barre that day, as far as I know.
Mhm.
So if that works, maybe we could get that on the calendar. Does it work for you, Janet, by the way? And
Right.
I think what we would do is if we're moving forward with the contract, we should let the contractor know of that plan and find out if it's something they want to participate in at that point. And I think it would also be fine to invite the city council, or at least let them know they're welcome to participate in the site plan. Jake, do you have any thoughts about that?
I'm sorry, I was multitasking, Dave. Do I have thoughts about the site visit timing?
About a site visit on October 26th, 4 o'clock, and that we would let the city council know so that if they wanted to attend, they'd have an opportunity.
Yeah, I think they'd love that. I will say the council has pushed back on early meeting things before 6 o'clock because
Right.
most of us work jobs, but
Right.
I think extending the invitation would be really
Yeah,
appreciated.
I mean, the challenge is if we meet at 6, it's dark outside, so it's harder to do a site visit. So I think if there's agreement, let's try to plan on Thursday, the 26th at 4 o'clock, and maybe we can meet at the city hall and Janet can get a quick agenda together so that we can do the appropriate public notice and all.
Great.
Okay, so we've gotten through that item. So now we've completed our old business. The new business item that I requested Janet add, and it's right in line with what Representative Anthony talked about as well, is interim zoning. Particularly because our planning grant process is slowed down because we haven't been able to find a contractor. And because there's the flood recovery things going on, it seemed that, and a housing crisis, shortage of housing, it seemed that this might be a very appropriate time to consider zoning changes sooner rather than later. And one process to do that, the fastest process to do that, is interim zoning changes. And the interim zoning changes are things that the city council basically adopts, declares that there's an emergency and can adopt changes in the zoning with just one meeting. And I thought it would be good for the planning commission to start thinking about and talking about if there are some things we might suggest the city council approve, or even see if we might attend a city council meeting or a work session, however the city council wanted to kind of go at talking about interim zoning in the fairly near future, to talk about thoughts and ideas and see if there's some consensus about things that could happen. And some things that I had thoughts about for short term for the interim zoning is talking about the parking requirements. And Representative Anthony kind of described those issues pretty well. And I know there's different perspectives in the community about what the parking requirements should be and or whether there should be any at all. But I think that's worthy of discussion because it does have an impact on the ability to bring in new housing, or if there's a major redevelopment that happens in North Barre, for example, the parking standards might well impact the design and how that could work. Another thought that crosses my mind is talking about the density requirements that the city has for zoning. Before the last zoning change, there were no density requirements, as I understand it and recall. But I know that there are a number of older unit buildings in the city that could have more living units in them, more apartments in them, but for the density requirements, because they're existing buildings that sit on very small lots, and because there has to be a certain number of square feet of lot space per unit, they can't add them. So I think that's something that would be worth a discussion, whether it would apply to all zoning districts or just some. That would be something that could possibly fairly quickly add some housing units in the city, and again might impact any redevelopment of flood damaged properties. So that was another thought that I had. Third thought is that the state statute is changing zoning, from the state level to allow duplexes, and in fact, in areas where there's water and sewer, I believe, up to 4 units. So that's another thing the city could consider, is adopting changes that implement that, and maybe even implement it before the state law goes into effect. or at least make clear that maybe the city welcomes that sort of development. So those are some thoughts I had. I don't know if other people have thoughts, but the whole idea would be to have a discussion and think about things that could help jumpstart housing or take away things that are impediments right now to more housing coming online. So now that I've said my thing, I'll shut up and let others speak. Janet has her hand up. Janet?
Thank you, David. Excuse me. One thing that I had thought of and is to extend, excuse me, extend our design review district to other areas that aren't currently covered that maybe could be covered. So what I'm suggesting is we all remember the Maple Avenue house that came down, that basically there was nothing that prevented us from issuing that demolition permit, is not in the design review district. If we extended that out, that would force the owner to go, at least to go in front of the DRB and then prove the demolition test, which is comprised of 6 steps.
Mhm.
It would, if anything, slow down the process, and then the DRB should vote to deny if it didn't meet at all. That's my thought, is to take a look at expanding some of the design review district. Say in the other end, you remember we extended it up Washington and now South Main when we redid the zoning 3 years ago, is to maybe go in the other direction. So that was one thing that I had quickly thought of. It's been simmering, so
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, well, I do think that, now the process would be putting out ideas and seeing what the city council, what planning commissioners think as a group, and what ultimately the city council thinks and decides. Becky?
Thanks. Yeah, I wholeheartedly support revisiting the parking requirements, the density requirements. Those seem like good places to start, especially if there's a previous zoning that we could go back to that could make this a little bit of an easier process. That seems like a kind of like low risk, easy thing that could be considered.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things I think we want to be careful about is there are a lot of things that control how many units can be on a property. One of them is density, one of them is parking, but there are other things, setbacks and square footage per unit and all those things. And some of them, I don't look at them as low-hanging fruit, because I think they're complex issues and they're interrelated. But I think I think there are some low-hanging fruit things. One of them is parking, and also, as Representative Anthony said, I think if we could address parking in the winter, that might help people find more consensus. Jake?
Yeah, I would just add on the parking thing. I think Councilor Lozon did make a fair point about that there can be parking nuisances when there are parking shortages, right? And so I think if this commission were to think about alternative ways for the city to get at parking nuisances, zoning is a really blunt ordinance because it requires people to build things that they may not need or want. It doesn't address the nuisance. Whereas in our parking ordinance, we could look at on-street parking, but we could also look at people parking in unauthorized spaces, or the zoning code could look at when people start parking on their front lawns, that they're not using their land in an approved, permitted way. There's ticketing authority, so there's that. So I think, as you peel back parking requirements, we also got to think about the other side of it on the nuisance ordinance. And we also have a minimum housing standards ordinance for rental properties. And I think it would be fair to require a disclosure to tenants how many assigned spaces they get with their apartment units, so that they know up front, the city knows how many parking spaces there are. And when people start parking in ways that negatively impact the neighbors or what should be open space, that there are ways to deal with it. On the demolition, I think this is a really important thing because I know Commissioner Averill and Munier were at the meeting on Tuesday, and they heard from the Commissioner of Housing how we've been losing housing units over the past decade. And I mean, we lose them to fire. I think of the apartment building that Al Fleury owned on Brook Street that's been torn down. The Catholic Church is tearing down a house. The Beverage Baron wants to demolish the owner of the Beverage Baron wants to demolish the Italian Baptist Church. Trying to think. Well, there's that auto shop over by the Amishan. We're losing grand list value, right? And we're losing buildings. We're losing heritage. And it's fine. That comes with financial impacts for the city. So I think making sure that we retain what we have as much as possible. And if a person no longer wants the property, they always have the option to put it up for sale and allow somebody else to have a chance at that. So I'd really encourage you to think a lot about those demolition provisions. I understand from Representative Anthony that demolition used to be approved by council. I don't necessarily think that's the best use of council's time, but I do think like having some higher level of review for demolition makes sense, and that's where Janet's suggestion to me, extending out at least along our corridors, main corridors, could be a great way to get better design outcomes too, because that's our front porch of our community. It's what people see when they drive through, and we want it looking at its best. I would also add to the interim zoning to look at minimum lot size. More and more studies throughout the United States are showing that minimum lot size is a key factor in affordability, and also lot width at the frontage of the street. And it's particularly can be important for townhouse style development where there's a building on its own lot, but it shares walls. So that enables a potential developer to sell those with federally backed mortgages with footprint lots or smaller lots, that a condo is not possible with a condo unit. And so figuring out how to allow more townhouse development and allowing those 2-lot subdivisions that could support a scattered site project by, let's say, Central Vermont Habitat or a private developer. Maybe they're looking at affordable modular construction for a single family home or a duplex or a fourplex like that were really common after the war. Those could be pretty powerful ways to incrementally grow homes in the community.
Okay, Raylene, did you have your hand up?
I did, but I'm not sure. So I was at the meeting the other night and I heard Doug Farnham talking, and one of his suggestions was that we may find a path forward in elderly housing. And then we heard a gentleman actually from, I believe, the Barre Manor get up and speak as well. And I'm just wondering if that's anything that we can deal with, or if that is more of a state level where more elderly housing is built, or that the maybe I don't know how to put this after talking to Hillary Cole and a few people today from housing. Maybe put some people from the Section 8 over into the Tilden House and move the elderly folk down to the Barre Manor, because that's what its purpose was originally for, so that they feel like they have a safe place to be, so that they start selling their homes. And because the word around town right now is that the current housing for elderly is not safe.
Well, I think that's worthy of discussion. I'm not sure that's in the purview of the planning commission, because I think it speaks more to how the housing authority manages properties, which probably has a lot to do with the regulations that they need to follow. I'm not very knowledgeable about it, but it's certainly another area in the city that's could stand some discussion and understanding whether, there's a lot of things in Barre that are scary Barre where there's words out that might be true, but might not be. And things kind of repeat themselves. That's outside. I think that's outside of the planning commission's process. But I do think some of the things Jake suggested again are ideas that would be worth discussion by the planning commission or the city council. And I just think it would be, and my thought, just would be good to get as many minds involved that deal with this, sitting around a table and batting some ideas around. And the idea of brainstorming is there's no bad ideas, and then start to work through and see if some of those things are workable and can be implemented pretty quick. So Jake.
Yeah, sorry to dominate the commission time. I'm such a nerd about this, and I do think Raylene has a point about about senior housing and supporting it, because there could be some incentives or bonuses that would be applied for senior housing project, age-restricted senior housing projects, which I think is 50+ housing. I'm not sure if we have that as a distinct use in the Unified Development Regulations, but Cathedral Square is the the foremost developer of senior housing, but they mostly operate in Northwest Vermont. And the way the funding cycles work for those federally subsidized units is that they would tend not to compete with Downstreet. So there have been some private age-restricted housing developments I'm aware of in Vermont, but I'm not aware of any in central Vermont just because of the rents. So getting a new senior housing project going could very much hinge on having good permissive zoning for senior housing, and then talking about some type of partnership between Downstreet and Cathedral Square, so that those two nonprofit housing developers aren't competing, but are finding win-win situations to build senior housing.
Janet.
Yeah, great dialogue for sure. Senior housing in our zoning right now is permitted in almost all of the urban core, municipal, mixed use, and all of the residential. Whereas assisted living, so senior housing is 55+. Assisted living is a little bit different, but it includes residential care homes. That's predominantly conditional use in all of our residential and our downtown core districts. So that with some discussion might be another easy fix. And we have lost two, maybe three residential care homes in the last 5 years, 2 to Washington County Mental Health, and another one who just sold it, and it became a triplex out on Brooklyn Street. So yeah, we don't have even the elder care that we used to. So just wanted to help inform.
Yeah, well, another challenge with that is there's a lot of sort of continuing care sort of communities that develop that provide independent living, but also assisted living, and in some cases nursing care and memory care. And the zoning, as you described it, doesn't really maybe contemplate that kind of development. So there's other other sorts of ways that senior housing is developed. And as we've talked about, in the past there are a lot of houses in Barre that have a lot of bedrooms and only a senior couple living in it because kids are all gone and the mortgage is paid off, and they like their house and they like their neighborhood, and there's nothing particularly compelling in central Vermont that would do better for them. So does anyone else have any thoughts about interim zoning? And is this something, I guess I'll ask 2 questions. One, is it something that maybe would be a subject for the next planning commission agenda? really devote some time, and then also just try to get some ideas together. That might involve asking commissioners to think about that ahead of the meeting and share any suggestions with Janet so that people get a chance to look at them and think about them in advance of the meeting. Janet, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask all of you what your thoughts were. I've got probably 7 or 8 noted things since the zoning went into effect in 2020, where our zoning districts themselves have prohibited expansion of housing. I don't know if we want to try to, if we would consider that low-hanging fruit, changing some of our zoning district lines. Somebody right up on Prospect has a 3-unit. The 3rd unit was a store, and she'd love to turn it into an apartment, but she can't because the zoning district she's in won't allow it. So she's frustrated, but she's being very patient. So I think about things like that. Eastern Avenue, there was another situation there. They wanted to do 4 complete units and they couldn't. So we put our heads together and got really creative about how to maximize as many units as he could using boarding situations and apartments. I can put it together and put it out there for discussion. Just wondered what your thoughts were. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to offer just a quick thought is, does the change in the state statute that would allow up to 4 units in any zoning district? What does that start in January 24 or does it start in January 25? I'm not sure, but that might have an impact on some of those things. So it's going to come, but one of the thoughts I had is if it's not coming that soon, is to consider getting it in the city's ordinances sooner.
Luckily, 3 and 4 unit dwellings are permittable in everything, in all but 1 urban core, 1 mixed use, and is permittable in all residential.
Okay.
So it's in some cases we were ahead of the curve, in other cases we were super conservative. So I think it's great conversation for sure.
Okay. So I think it'd be good to have Caitlin.
I did unmute myself. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Stuart. I just wanted to respond to your question about I would really welcome further discussion on this topic at a future meeting where I feel a little bit more prepared to contribute.
Okay.
I'm still rather new to all this, and so I haven't delved really deeply into the existing all the existing zoning regulations. But if there was something that I could look at that said, here are the areas we're looking at changing, and this is how we might change them, that would be really helpful. And then I would feel, prepared to offer my thoughts and opinions on it.
Okay. Well, I think this was meeting just to kind of try to set that up, but we've had a lot of good ideas come out too.
Yeah.
So Becky.
Thanks. I think I have a question, which is there any discretion given how tight our housing situation is right now in some of the examples that you've shared, Janet? It sounds like you have no discretion to permit something that is a good idea but maybe doesn't comply with our zoning laws, or can those people be sent to the DRB to get a variance from the zoning to be able to do some of the things while we're in this process? Because it sounds like there are opportunities that are just not happening because of zoning that we know is not serving our community. And I'm just wondering, is there anything, I don't know, could city council make a proclamation or do something, or are there other ways around this while we do the work that takes the time?
Yeah.
I recognize that that's not the solution, but if we have people who are ready to build housing in our community and we're oh, sorry, our zoning we wrote 3 years ago that we don't like says you can't do it, that's not satisfying.
Yeah. I think that's the idea of the interim zoning, is that's the quick fix for the emergency. And it's just chatting about finding the things that have pretty wide consensus and things that the city council is agreeable to, since they do the process. But in theory, they could put it on stuff on an agenda and at their next meeting and make those changes. So that's kind of the idea of the interim zoning, is to do exactly what you thought. It's just identifying those things that seem to be low-hanging fruit that would be impactful and not be harmful in the longer term.
Right, interim zoning is fondly referred to as one and done. It requires one public notice at the city council level. And it goes into effect and is good for 2 years. I mean, worst case is the city council could revoke this zoning and go back to the old one. That would be a really drastic measure for sure. But there's lots of options. And just so you know, zoning administrators are bound by law to interpret the zoning literally. So just because it's a great idea, if it's not allowed, I don't want to go to court. I don't want Michelle to go to court. So
Yeah, no, I like, that's part of why I was asking, because I figured there was probably a reason. And that's a very good one.
Yes.
So yeah.
Variances are governed by state law, and they're actually pretty exacting, all the conditions that have to be met. So that's probably not a preferable way of trying to accomplish this, because it's hard to fit things into some of those needs for variance. And if they don't fit exactly, you have a potential for litigation, which, doesn't help.
Got it.
Yes, David's correct. Use variances are not allowed, and I asked for that to be specifically put into this zoning. We've had trouble in the past interpreting variance versus a use variance, and don't want to go down that path again. So we have opportunities for variances and waivers, but a use variance, if it's not allowed, it's just plain not allowed. So
not allowed. Yeah.
It's
okay.
protection on staff too, that we don't do something we're not supposed to either.
But if there is concern about certain uses, the way to manage that is make it a conditional use, because then it has to go before the DRB for consideration. So that is a way to maybe accomplish that, if there's things that we think we'd like to do, but maybe not blanket allowing it in the zoning, but saying that a public body can look at something and say, yeah, that's a good idea for this particular location. It makes sense. And at the same time, if they get another request, look at it and say, this doesn't make sense in this location. That's another kind of option.
Yeah. Okay. And my other question was, like, have we approached this possibility with city council, and do we know how, like, what their temperature is on this?
Well, when I talked to Janet, my suggestion was to put forward the idea to see if city council might be interested in doing a joint meeting of some sort that was a working session, to do something like what we're doing now, but again, with a little more preparation and information. And the best outcome would be, we have this great discussion, that there's a pretty wide consensus about, let's just say, for example, 4 or 5 items that could be changed in interim zoning, and then the city council could take it from there. I just don't know if the council is receptive to that, or if that would be a process they want to follow, but that would be a pretty fast track way of accomplishing things and getting a broader range of input. I don't know if, Jake, do you have any thoughts about if that's a good approach, or something the city council would entertain?
Yeah, I think we'd be open to it. Things are gonna start sooner, better than later, because we're gonna start getting into budget discussions, and that's
Right.
gonna dominate everything. And then on top of that, with flood discussions. So I think it could be an ask, but it's probably better like on a Saturday morning with the time limit and a really clear topics of discussion, clear language, clear background information. And some choices and consequences packaged.
Well, I definitely agree that if this is going to be a meeting, it shouldn't just be appended to a regular agenda. Because that just is too much. I don't know if commissioners would be up for some kind of, Saturday morning meeting from, 9 to noon or something like that, as an example. And again, where there were some concrete ideas and, thoughts for discussion. It might be that I'm not sure the discussion would have so much specific language as talking about ideas, seeing if things make sense, and then the direction that would come out would be for the city staff, be more work for Janet, or somebody would have to take that and put it into zoning speak, to come up with specific language that would change the zoning that could then go back to city council. That reason, do you think that would make sense, Jake? And I think it's just maybe Janet talking to city manager, to Nicholas, about when we might find a time that could be done. And I think you're correct, Jake. There's a lot going on, and it is going to be budget season, and all these things with the north end and flood redevelopment are going to start heating up and require a lot of attention, but this is part of the attention that might help move that process forward. Caitlin.
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of say the same thing, that like there's a lot going on, but this is really feels like something that's urgently needed to help with some of this flood recovery. That finding housing for people that were displaced is, I can't think of many things that are more urgent than figuring out where these people are going to go over the winter. So
yeah. And one concern is that process starts, and then all of a sudden somebody wants to do something, and it's, oh well, the zoning doesn't allow it. I would rather the zoning allowed it, or those issues got addressed up front, so that when people make plans, they kind of know what the rules are, and it's not a roadblock at the time. And certainly, if planning companies are designed to hire to do grand plans and conceptual plans, or develop them from there, like there's some discussion about for the north end, better that they know what the constraints are before they invest too much in it, than bump into them, or even tell us what's in our zoning that might be a constraint to accomplishing what you're thinking about. So I think, oh yes, Becky.
I just have a clarifying question. So for our next meeting, what we're being asked to do is, and what we're asking Janet to do, is not necessarily redline the zonings, but to give us like a list of where we might, of like the kinds of changes we might consider.
I think that's the idea, and I think my thought is that if commissioners have ideas, write down your idea with a paragraph explaining what and why, and so that there can be a packet of things. This is sort of running parallel to perhaps having a meeting with city council. So if there's a working session with city council that can come sooner rather than waiting for the next planning commission, that might replace that for the planning commission. But I think the point would still be for all the planning commissioners to think about things that are in the zoning, and you can certainly find it on the city's website, or you may have ideas like we've discussed. Just think about them, put them on paper, put a little plug forward, or a paragraph explaining what your thought process is and why it might help, and whether that's part of a packet for a joint work session with city council, or part of the packet for the next planning commission meeting. It's the same thing. Does that make sense? Are commissioners willing to go home and think about that stuff and get back to Janet? Yeah, Jake.
David, if I could just jump in and say on second thought, recognizing how much staff loves to come in and work on Saturdays, as well as people love to give up Saturdays. It may work to just have council join a normal planning commission time slot, and you increase your frequency of meetings to get this packaged.
Yeah. That would be fine. My suggestion is that Janet talk to Nicholas and figure out what the best course is that meets the staff's needs and the planning commission needs and the city council needs, but get something going sooner rather than later. Does that sound reasonable as a way forward? Okay, well, there was no specific action designed for this. This was really meant to be a discussion and just kind of figure out if we want to move forward and how that might happen. So I think we've got a consensus on that. So off we go. So Janet's going to be waiting for lots of emails from planning commissioners now. So the next item on the agenda is confirming our next meeting date, which is November 9th. And we also just talked about having a meeting before that. That's going to be a site visit for the North Main and Elm Street project. The next item is staff updates, and you did have that was in your agenda packet. I don't know if anybody had, number one, Janet, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I would love to add some positivity. We've had lots of discussions lately with people who want to increase housing here in Barre City. There is I guess he's becoming a developer. I knew him as a land surveyor, working with a property owner, 13 Hill Street, owned by Ishtar Properties. They are looking to potentially build 3 multi-unit buildings on that property. They're trying to work out the bank behind it, which actually is the bank behind the hilltop houses that were torn down in 2014. So they're working out that, but I think the problem with that one is going to be the entrance. The property entrance is only 13.25 feet wide. So we've got a meeting set up with them as well as public safety officials to get their temperature on what they think about, safety and fire truck turnaround. But here's somebody who's looking at trying to do something with a piece of property. I've also been told the railroad has been eyeballing more property to buy up. They're looking at a property across the street to tear down for one of their communication boxes. At the moment, that house is vacant, but here we go, wanting to tear down a house, right? So there's that. So I take that as a positive move forward. I just spoke with the owner this afternoon of 171 North Main. Used to be the nail salon. It was, some of you folks who've been here a while we call that the Beltrami building. They want to, it's the old Magnet movie theater. They want to put in an actual second floor. It's like a false ceiling. Put in 4 units of housing on the second floor and redevelop the first floor for retail, office space, whatever they can get in there. So that's great. Barre Gardens up at the end of Prospect Street really was trying to figure out how to bring modular homes onto the backside behind the nursing home. But it's too wet back there, which is frustrating. But they were getting creative on trying to, help their travelers and some of their nursing staff. So people they're being creative. They're trying to figure out things. And I feel like if it's not zoning, then it's the topography. But I think we'll get there somehow. The owner of the radio station at the end of Jake Street just sold. They're going to turn that into a single family home. It's a big piece of property, but it's not going to be commercial anymore. It's going to be residential. So I feel like that's a good thing. So there's a lot happening. Turning Point, as you know, got a grant with the city. They're still trying to get themselves moved down to the building next to the fire station. They have all their funding. They're just trying to get through some of their phase environmental site assessment work. So that's going to be coming along once they move. The building in the north end could free up. Maybe the owner will improve the housing, add to the housing. Who knows? I think there's an opportunity there. Granite City Apartments, which is a partnership between Down Street Housing and Evernorth, which are developers. We're talking about the Ward 5 school that's moving along. And they own Bromer Street Apartments. If any of you go up Beckley Street, right before it turns to Beckley Hill and Barre Town, they are renovating those apartments and they're turning one apartment into a fully accessible unit. So they're improving their stock as well. So there's a lot going on, and I just want to share all these little wins that, you know, people are working and it's great. I finished the glossary that I was asked to do a year and a half ago. So that is now on the Planning Commission page. It's 85 pages of acronyms and definitions. And if you're ever stuck and you don't know what something means, I hope it's there. If it's not, let me know. And lastly, the city's hazard mitigation plan expired a year ago in December. And that assists us with getting funding. It's called the Emergency Relief Assistance Fund funding. And when we had a plan, we were at the 75-25, which meant that we only had to kick in 25% match. So we're down to 9.5 at the moment. The City Council just awarded that contract to Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission, and they are eager to get started, and they think they can update our plan and get us going by, I think Keith said by March or April, they'll be putting a draft in front of FEMA for approval. So I find that really, really exciting. And last, this is a personal win. The hazard mitigation project that we did on Granite Street 2 years ago now, it was increasing the size of the storm drains that went from Granite Street, and which is in front of the turn to go to Capstone, all the way out to the river past Desero Machines. We've been waiting. I've been bugging Vermont Emergency Management now for many years for that funding to come through, and they finally convinced FEMA, I think, to give us our third and final requisition. So we're going to be seeing a check for over $128,000 in reimbursement. And as the city manager and the assistant city manager say, it's already spent, but it means that's not money that's going to go get written off. So I just, when we can get little wins like that, I think it's great. So those are the high points I just wanted to share with you folks. So thank you very much.
Thanks. That's terrific. Does anyone have any questions for Janet about staff report? I think Becky likes the report. So the next item on the agenda is roundtable. So I don't know if any commissioners have anything they want to say. It's an opportunity to do that. Rosemary.
Hi, Becky and I just wanted, as long as the mayor's here and the planning commission, Becky and I received an invitation to participate in the forum on October 18th. And Becky has stepped up the last couple of times about being interim chair and vice chair. So I felt as though I should be the one stepping up this time. So I've offered to be the planning commission voice on the infrastructure and planning topic. But I just want to make sure we're all singing from the same songbook. I don't know if Jake, I mean, there's so many conversations going on council level. I just want to make sure we're all just have the common theme of what our message is to the city. So if there's anybody that has feedback about that, I would appreciate it.
Anyone want to speak up just now? I guess I would say in a very broad sense that the infrastructure and planning things, it's going to be important to try to be resilient and that when things get updated and replaced, that they're more flood proof, because we're gonna have another flood someday, we know that.
Right.
And, just kind of putting everything back the way it was, is sort of the Albert Einstein theory of, trying the same thing over and over is the definition of insanity. So, I just,
Becky, are you okay with my doing that? Are you sure? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, anybody else?
Anyone else have anything you want to add?
I just have a question. Have we had the second reading for the ADU zoning? And then do we know when that will be?
I asked the city manager where that stood, and that has been delayed just so we can work out and hear when the proclamation comes to an end, what we're gonna do with the zoning. It was a pretty heated debate about the parking. It is supposed to go to the second reading. That's what it's ready for. I think it's just a matter of time. I don't think I hope it's not going to be another heated debate. A second public reading and hearing is supposed to be a relatively smooth sailing off into, they vote on it, and 14 days later, after Carol gets the notice published, that it's good to go. So I think it's just a timing issue. And I will check in again with Nicholas and see when he thinks we could get that scheduled, and I'll let you folks know.
Awesome, thanks.
You're welcome. It looks like David got his call, maybe. Becky, do you want to maybe
Quite
step off?
possibly. Sure. I had the agenda open in front of me. There it is. Okay. Any other comments from the commissioners? Okay. In that case, I think I can entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thanks. All in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, David.
Oh, you're back.
Surgery went well.
Just
Oh,
in time.
good.
Oh, well,
Thanks for being
fantastic. That's great to
Great
hear.
news.
Well,
All
happy
right. I
Halloween,
think we're
everybody.
adjourned.
Okay, thanks.
See you on
Night,
the
everyone.
26th.
Everyone.
Thanks, Janet.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.